Good afternoon, and welcome to our joint session on dual credit processing for ATCs and KCTCS. I'm excited about making this process smoother by getting out in front of next year's enrollment today. Since we have some college and center staff with us today, I want to thank you for collaborating with our career and technology centers to advance the CTE opportunities for our high school students. And center principals and staff, I want to thank you for all you've done this year for your students. Today is to review the dual credit process for our centers and our KCTCS partners and to make sure our processes are as efficient as possible. With me today is Ms. Harmony Little, Director of Career Pathways with KCTCS Systems Office, and Tanya Fluke from the Office of Career and Technical Education. After Harmony discusses the process, Tanya will give you some guidance on how to identify dual credit students in the KTS, the Kentucky Tech System of Infinite Campus. There's an email address on the screen to send your questions, and we will answer as many as possible today. Any we don't get answered, we'll send back out an email to all of you with the questions with the answers. So without further ado, Harmony, would you like to start?
Yes.
On our presentation today?
Thank you so much, David. I'm glad we can do this together. And thank you all who are paying attention to this today. We want to spend this time together to talk about the statewide MOU, SACS COC policies, local MOAs, our KCTCS billing process, the dual credit scholarship process, and then Tanya will finish up with identifying dual credit in Infinite Campus. We are also saving time for questions and answers because we believe there are many in the field. So to start off, want to talk about what is in the statewide MOU between KCTCS and KDE. We have an overarching MOU for the entire state that gets signed by the commissioner and by the president of KCTCS. In it, it describes the state dual credit policies established by CPE, the state-approved career pathways, KCTCS dual credit course offerings, awarding of dual credit, the dual credit rate, the dual credit scholarship, eligibility, registration process, dual credit class types, faculty qualifications, academic policies, and school responsibilities. We are going to go further in depth on the KCTCS dual credit course offerings, the scholarship, and faculty qualifications during this webinar. SACS-COC, which is the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commission on College, is the accrediting body for each of our 16 KCTCS institutions. Each one of those are independently accredited by SACS, and therefore they have to abide by their guidelines. The short of it is that all commission principles and policies apply without exception to dual credit enrollment students, programs, and institutional site. So what applies to a student that attends to a KCTCS campus also applies to a dual credit student at one of your locations. Regarding instructor qualifications, SACS-COC requires that whatever qualifications the college has for an instructor to teach that course are the same qualifications the high school has to meet. The secondary school faculty will have to demonstrate through appropriate documentation compliance with KCTCS teaching qualifications, and appropriate documentation will include official college transcripts, a current VITA, resume, or application showing teaching and work experience, official documentation of relevant work experience, and any documentation local policy requires. Regarding dual credit course offerings, all irregular academic policies that applies to courses taught at the college also apply to dual credit courses taught on a high school campus. Dual credit courses must meet the same student learning outcomes as equivalent courses at the KCTCS college. KCTCS college grading policy will apply to dual credit courses and will be used by the secondary school awarding credit. All existing college deadlines, including dropping, adding, and withdrawing from college courses, shall apply for all dual credit and dual credit scholarship students. College credit should be awarded upon the student's completion of the dual credit course requirements and will become part of the student's official college transcript. The award of college credit will be in compliance with appropriate accreditation standards for KCTCS colleges. And high school credit shall be awarded at the end of the term by the secondary school upon successful completion of the course. The award of high school credit will be in compliance with state standards. So that's a lot of information on slides, but we thought it was important to give you the language that is in the statewide MOU regarding these principles.
Harmony, if I could interrupt for a moment, I forgot to mention at the beginning of the webinar that I did send out this PowerPoint, so you folks watching in the centers, it should be on your email and you can pull it up and follow along with us today.
That's great. Thank you for doing that. The last thing regarding SAC-COC that I want to cover is off-site offerings. Again, going back to the fact that anything that happens at a KCTCS college has to be applied to an off-site offering. Regarding SAC-COC, they believe that anything we teach at one of the high school institutions is an off-site offering. So we are required to notify SACs before we offer 25 to 49% of a credential or program at an off-site location. And institutions are required to get approval from SAC-COC before offering 50% or more of a credential or program at an off-site location. An institution may seek approval, submit a singular prospective for up to 10 off-site locations to offer 50 or more of a program if the program offering is identical across off-site locations. And institutions may not pre-approve off-site locations. Prospectus must include the specific program, curriculum, and faculty expected to teach the off-site location. So the reason we wanted to share this information is to make everybody understand why some KCTCS colleges are able to provide a certain course as dual credit, why maybe an institution down the road is not. It's having to do with the fact of whether or not we have already filled in this paperwork. So an example I want to provide is if you have 2 welding courses that together make up 50% or more of the credential that KCTCS gives out, then that is considered something that we have to have permission for you all to offer.
We have a question I'd like you to take a look at,
Okay.
Harmony. Need to review student offerings in CTE regarding alignment with KCTCS courses.
Okay, so I am a little unclear on the question. With the student offerings in CTE regarding alignment with CTE courses, I am going to address our alignment and the courses we are offering in just a few minutes.
Okay.
So if the person that is interested in this, if we have not answered that question by the time we come to that part in the presentation, please let us know what the more specifics.
Okay. And there's a comment about off-site changing of addresses you might want to bring up.
Okay, yes, so the question is if approved off-site locations change names or address, SAC-COC must be notified prior to change. That is absolutely correct. Yes, those are the kind of items we are required to notify SACs of. So going back to the example, just to try to make sense of all the stuff that was on that slide, if we have those 2 welding courses that together make up 50% or more of what the certificate is, that is when we are required to fill in paperwork stating that we are providing that course at an off-site location. There's only 2 times a year when we submit that paperwork. It is January and July, and getting that approval takes a long time. So this is where it requires collaboration and partnership between the KCTCS school as well as the high school to be thinking ahead of what you want to offer. Because you, as the last bullet says, we cannot approve an off-site location for that. So I know that the majority of the ATCs have SACS approval, but I think about 1/3 of them don't at the moment. And the other thing I want to clarify is if one ATC location has been approved for one program, then we simply keep on adding the information for SACs regarding other programs. But if we have not had a location that has been approved at all, we have to go through this paperwork. David, we have a running list at the system office of who has done this and who has not. And we are happy to work with anybody who wants to make sure that they're an approved site. Now, if you are not an approved site and the courses you are offering are below 50%, the certificate may be 18 credit hours and your course is only 3 credit hours, then we're good to go. It is if we meet that 50% or more. And there are a number of our technical courses that actually lead to a certificate. For example, the NAA 100 course, that in and of itself is a standalone certificate. Several welding courses, including our auto tech courses, are also standalone certificates. So this is why we think it's so important that everybody understand why it varies from campus to campus, what can and cannot be offered as dual credit. I'm going to pause and see if any other questions have come in. Otherwise, I'll keep on going.
Oh, you're good.
Okay, thank you. So then moving on to what is required for a syllabus. This is the last COC requirement. And again, the course requirements for secondary students enrolled in dual credit courses at a secondary school should be equal to those of college students enrolled at the KCTCS college. So students should receive an official course syllabus by the first or second day of their college course. And the syllabus should include the course requirement information, including official description, course prerequisite, course content, grading policy, attendance requirements, course completion requirements, performance standards, and other related course information. Criteria that should also include criteria to be used in evaluating the student's performance, a course grading system that includes specific expectations for relative weights, and the requirements that the grades described in the KCTCS catalog will be used. So pausing to see if there are any questions.
Yes, there is. Is there an issue with contact hours required for KCTCS courses, or are there issues?
Without specific information regarding what issues they mean with contact hours, it's hard for me to answer that question. I'll be happy to either see if they can provide us more information or follow up after. But I'm guessing, well, I don't want to speculate, but I know that sometimes we have to deliver a course over 1 year at one of your locations versus 1 semester because of contact hours. I don't know if that is what the question is getting to.
Okay, here, I think that person is trying to elaborate further. Can ATCs earn enough contact hours? We submitted the required information to become an approved SEC site for more than 50% of a credential in November 2017. How do we know, or who do we contact to see if it was approved?
There is, each of our KCTCS colleges has a SAC-COC liaison. I think that would probably be the person to start, or the dual credit coordinator who can reach out. If that is not somebody that you're able to contact, sometimes in the summer it's hard to get folks, you are always welcome to contact me. My email address will be at the end of it. We would expect to hear back on an application that was filed at that time around now. So hopefully we would be able to have an answer soon. We have a person at our office at KCTCS, the system office, who frequently works with the colleges, so we could try to get that information in one way or another. But that information would be provided directly to the college.
We have another example. The example is, if welding needs 90 contact hours, how do the ATCs earn enough hours?
So I think that's where we have to consider going into a 2-semester program to get enough contact hours, but those are the kind of things that will have to be negotiated locally with the faculty liaison and the department in question. So in this instance, it would be welding to make sure that requirements are met. The reason, I don't mean to sound vague, but because each individual institution is accredited, the state, we cannot speak for what needs to happen from the state level, because it has to meet the local requirements and the local policies, because it's the individual institution that is SACS accredited.
I think what we might want to take a look at, I believe this is relating to, is one high school credit, what is it equal to in terms of college credit?
Sure.
So, again, that's something that depends on the particular programming that you're involved in and the college that you're dealing with. So I would refer that question, as Harmony said, to your local college that you're working with dual credit. Any others?
No other questions at this time.
Okay, wonderful. Then we'll keep on going. So the local MOAs that we have with each district, they are an addendum to the statewide MOU, which has had all the language that I just went over, and then some. So this is where we are allowing for a little bit more detail between the college and the local school district. The main 2 points that are outlined in the MOA, is cost and then the course. So the MOA, it gets confusing, David.
It does.
The MOA is due back by July 31st. Just a heads up, next year we're hoping to have these done much, much sooner. We delayed getting the MOUs out because we were waiting to see what, if anything, would happen to dual credit in the legislative session. But for us to get the MOAs back July 31st is almost too late because priority registration for fall semester started March 1st. So giving everybody a heads up that next year we are going to get the MOAs out a lot sooner. But in the meantime, we want them back by July 31st, and I will explain a little further down in the webinar why that is an important date. But first I would like to focus on the selection of dual credit courses. So hopefully this is where I will answer the question that came in earlier, but if not, I hope that person will give us some clarification on what it was you were asking.
And Harmony, if I could, we're hoping that next year, a lot of our high schools do their scheduling during the spring. And that's the time that we need to start looking at what dual credit courses we're going to place students in. So those students can get in that early enrollment process and not be hit with all of that happening when school starts. So just wanted to bring that up to kind of get ahead of the curve next year, knowing we'll have these MOUs and MOAs out in time to do that.
I think that's an excellent strategy, and I think that would be very beneficial for the entire process, but for the students in particular. So I'm happy to hear that. So the reason that we have to select dual credit courses is, of course, we are bound by the law in terms of what can be a dual credit course and what cannot. So dual credit courses should be meaningful to students and the pathway they are enrolled in. Dual credit courses should be useful for a student when they transfer to post-secondary institution and count towards the credential they are taking. The reason I included that statement on here is, quite frankly, at times we see courses that we don't feel meet these requirements. We at the state level do not police this, but we are encouraging our colleges to make sure that what is offered as dual credit meets this intent for a student. We have unfortunately seen a couple of examples. I'll throw out the most common one. You've heard this before, walking. We are not quite sure how walking will benefit a student when they participate in post-secondary. It may satisfy a PE requirement at the high school level, but not necessarily help towards that post-secondary degree.
Exactly.
Is there a question?
There is a question for you. Please make certain that viewers are aware of the cost of SACS COC site approval that College Partners cover.
Okay, so going back to SACS COC, this is a little outside of my area of knowledge, but I believe each prospectus, so each application where we can include up to 10 programs, is a $500 cost to the college. So thank you for that. So back to the selection of dual credit courses. So with the intent being that we want to make sure that these courses are meaningful, that is one of the reasons we are asking high schools and colleges to work together to identify what those courses should be. just because it's a high school course doesn't necessarily mean that it is relevant for the student when they come to the post-secondary experience. We don't see this with the ATCs that much, so please don't take too much offense to those statements, but we want to make sure everybody hears it. We have heard from some of our four-year partners that when students come there with a number of gen ed courses, for general education courses, if they're not intending to major in a particular subject area, some of what they took in high school may not be beneficial to them. So that is why we just want to be mindful of what the student's intent is. The other thing I want to remind everybody is that high school students must meet post-secondary admission requirements. All students must be admitted to and enrolled or accepted for enrollment at the KCTCS college and complete the college dual credit application. Dual credit students at KCTCS are classified as non-degree seeking students because they are still in high school, even if they're working towards earning a credential. But all non-degree seeking students, regardless, have to meet course prerequisites. And this is more directed towards CTE because the majority of our general education courses have college readiness indicators on it, but actually a lot of our CTE courses don't have course prerequisites, but some do. So that is another thing to be mindful of when picking dual credit courses for it. So the other thing that's on the slide is just what's included in the template in terms of what has to be submitted on this MOA. So we need to know what the KCTCS course prefix is, the course description, and the local high school. And what we do on our end at KCTCS is we code this into our student enrollment management system so that we are only enrolling students in courses that have been designated dual credit for that particular college. I know folks may panic over the July start or the July deadline for the MOA, which is why we have put in a provision that if additional courses need to be added after that, it can be done with the approval of the academic officer at the college. So we've allowed for that mechanism because I know that sometimes it's hard to know what's going to happen in the spring. But we still feel that if we provide a menu of options, that should allow everybody to work from the same set of information, and that's our goal.
Yes, and we might want to clarify here for our technology centers. We've talked about MOAs, and the MOA is an agreement between the district and KCTCS on payment for the dual credit courses. The MOU, there were a few exceptions last year where ATCs were asked to sign an agreement with the college. So we have the MOU, which is a memorandum of understanding that it does not involve any money, but we have that available. But we really don't want the ATCs entering into those agreements. But if you get to that place, principals, just let me know, and we've got the MOU in place now that we can get that taken care of. But hopefully most of the districts will be handling that on their end this year.
Thank you for mentioning that, David. That was a little bit difficult to manage on our end last year when it varied by school districts. We didn't know when we needed to expect an MOA from an ATC, so we didn't know if those students were taken care of or not. So it's a lot easier for us to know that we're expecting to get it from the district and the ATCs are included in that. And that is why, if you look again at how we laid this out in the MOA, we've asked them to identify where the course will be offered. Because we know particularly with the CTE courses, they may not be offered at the home high school. Because
Correct.
they don't offer welding or auto tech, et cetera. So then we would, that's where you would call out what would be offered at the local ATC.
Okay.
So,
There is a question that has come in. One issue with dual credit in the ATC is that the student earns a high school credit for welding 110 and 111 during their sophomore year, and then during their junior year, they earn it for 120 and 121, and then decide to take the dual credit their senior year. If the dual credit approved course is WLD 110, 111, the student is unable to earn the college credit because the name of the course has already been transcripted on the high school transcript.
Yes, this is something that we are aware of, and I think it's an issue in certain parts of the state, but not in other parts of the state. So that is all I can speak to here because it's more a regional issue because it is being treated a little bit differently across the state. So it's one of the things we're working with your consultants on to try to figure out a fix for that.
If you could email that particular question to give us a name and with that, and we'll get back with you, and the college that you're associated with.
Yeah, so, and I, just to speak some more, because I know some of the background of this, one of the things, because of the name being identical, it prevents them from accessing the dual credit scholarship the second time around. But I believe the intent of the original 110, 111 course, which they take earlier in high school, is to be the same course as what's offered at KCTCS. So we just have some items we need to work out there collectively.
Okay.
There are a couple more questions. Do you want to?
Sure, I am happy to entertain them now.
Okay. Will the ATC receive assistance related to the students who need to complete the KIA application and earning the dual credit scholarship?
I don't know who that question is directed to. I think our dual credit coordinators, we have at least one per college, and we have certainly some other colleges where we have more folks working on it. They're knowledgeable in what the process is and what the requirements are. And again, that is something that I plan on sharing a little bit later. But I don't know that our independent or that our dual credit coordinators has the capacity to go out and provide that assistance. It may be something we need to ask KIA to facilitate. I do know that KIA has a nice job aid to help students navigate how to go about doing that. And I think part of what we all need to do as partners in the dual credit scholarship is just help get the information out there. But I don't know that we can commit our folks. I don't know if you have folks on your end that will be able to help.
Go ahead. I mean, they're just saying, their comment is that ATCs do not have access to as many administrative people in place at their location.
Well, I think what happens in those cases is that our teachers end up being assisting with those types of things, and our principals. And I know you guys are all loaded to the gills, but I think once you have been on the KIA website and can navigate that process to help those students. But again, I'll address that question after our webinar today and get a little more detailed information on how we can help you with that process.
Thank you. Tanya, anything else?
Yes, there are more. Does an instructor at an ATC which was hired under occupational-based work experience and can submit valid work experience documentation, can they teach dual credit courses with an associate's degree in that field?
So the answer is it's going to depend. It's going to depend on what the qualification is for somebody to teach that course at the local KCTCS institution. There is not one uniform. Even within our KCTCS institutions, the requirements to be able to teach may vary from one discipline to another.
I would just say that will go through the normal process for adjuncts. Generally speaking, if you have that technical associate's degree along with experience, that has not been a problem in the past. But again, it depends on the specific area that you're talking about. So it would have to be answered at that level, the college level.
Yeah, and one of the better examples I can give in this area to not maybe be so vague is we have in our business administration curriculum, there's a course related to law. At some of our KCTCS institutions, that college requires that the person teaching that has a law degree, while at some of our other institutions, they have a different requirement. So that's why it's difficult for us to say, because it's up to each institution to set what those requirements are.
Okay. How quickly can we expect new instructors to gain approval to teach dual credit courses? And what happens when students are enrolled into fall 2018 courses and then the ATC loses that instructor and has a new one in place?
Well, I think I can take that one. I mean, if we do not have an adjunct in place, then we cannot offer it as dual credit unless we make some arrangements with the institution we're working with. You know, we're willing to be creative in terms of accommodation and offering those opportunities to all students. But we have to have a qualified instructor that's been approved as an adjunct for the college in order to offer the dual credit. In terms of how fast it happens, the process in the past, Harmony, I think that has taken time is the SACS accreditation of the site. Generally speaking, once those are turned in, and it's not that long a period to get adjuncts approved or not.
I don't think that process is that lengthy, but again, it may vary depending on what else is going on at that institution and what that administrator has on their plate. But that process shouldn't be that long. But I appreciate you reinforcing the fact that they have to meet our standards in order to be able to teach the course.
Correct.
There is one more question that I'm probably going to be the one that can answer. For scholarship student needs, Social Security numbers, and dual credit coordinators, and in some cases CTE folks, don't have access to this information. Should be feeder high school counselors helping out with this process. So I know from experience, first of all, students are not required to give their Social Security numbers, but if they don't give their Social Security numbers, they need to realize that they're not going to get the scholarship benefits and so forth. As far as being able to see that information in Infinite Campus, that is a rights, that has to do with the rights that you've been administered in your Infinite Campus database, and you would need to speak to your supervisor to request permissions to be able to gain access to the Social Security information in your district. It's different for every district. Do you have anything further on that?
No.
Okay.
Any more questions?
How are
Hot topic.
yeah. How are the enrolled students affected if the instructor is not approved? Does every student need to complete an add drop form?
I would defer that mostly to what the local process is, but my guess is that the answer is yes. Because if we have enrolled them as dual credit and we no longer are able to offer that, then we would have to withdraw them from that status.
Okay. And then we have somebody that said students are required to add Social Security numbers for Kia login. That is correct, and we cannot make them give us their Social Security number. If they opt not to give us their Social Security number, then they just won't get that type of reporting to Kia. So it may be something that they have to do later on if they decide that they want to get access to Kia scholarships and so forth and so on. That'll be something that they'll have to work on later on. But we can't make them give us their Social Security numbers.
Okay, thank you, Tanya.
So moving on to the other item that is part of the MOA, and that is negotiating the student fees and payments. The purpose of it is to identify the other expenses that are not either covered by tuition or if a student is eligible for the dual credit scholarship. So typical items that we often see being negotiated between the KCTCS institution and the high school is the cost of textbooks, digital content or resources, library or insurance charges, Barnes & Noble charges, and classroom consumables. There may be others that will be negotiated between them, but this is what's included in the MOA because this is what we see coming up over and over again. The other thing we want to point out is that dual credit professional development costs for district faculty is the responsibility of the district. So for example, if the college is hosting a professional development day, particularly for new instructors, KCTCS will not pay for the release of that instructor or a substitute for that instructor, so that is the responsibility of the school district. So that's what we wanted to cover in that section. Tanya, were there any questions? Okay. Then I will go on and share with you all how the billing process works at KCTCS. First of all, I want to remind everybody that per House Bill 206 that was implemented last year, tuition for dual credit course is 1/3 of the credit hour of tuition charged by KCTCS for in-state students. Colleges cannot charge eligible dual credit students anything more than the dual credit tuition rate ceiling per credit hours, including fees. So regardless of whether the student earns the dual credit or a scholarship or not, the tuition is 1/3 across the state. Now, if a student is enrolled in a KCTCS course that is not deemed to be dual credit, which we call dual enrollment, so it's a course where they're getting high school credit, they are getting college credit, they are not getting high school credit, then that is full tuition. Because this whole process with determining the who is eligible for dual credit scholarship, course information changes as happens. They enroll in one course, but a week later they drop it, enroll in a different course. It takes a while for us to get our billing straight. So we just recently made the decision that we are going to suppress bills for all high school students until October 19, 2018. So the reason we're delaying bills that long is to give high school students time for us to reconcile tuition payment that is either done through SEEK funding, the dual credit scholarship, or if there are other locally available options prior to sending bills to families indicating that they owe a balance, because that has been confusing in the past. When we have sent them a bill, maybe even before we knew that the course they were enrolled in was a dual credit course. So then they got a bill for 100% of the tuition instead of the 1/3. And you can imagine that causes probably some concern when the bill is a lot higher than you thought it would be, or you're expecting that a bill will be taken care of through the scholarship. And we don't know that information yet, because as you'll see in a moment, that process is delayed and happens way later than the start of our school semester. So e-bills will go out October 19. But what I want to remind everybody of is now that we've had, it's really been 2 years of the dual credit scholarship, but it's been 1 year in its new form. Students who have already received a scholarship for 2 successfully completed courses are no longer eligible for it. So if they were a junior this academic year and they've utilized 2 scholarships, they're not eligible for any more in their senior year. So if you're enrolling them in dual credit courses their senior year, somebody is responsible for paying that tuition. And then I've already mentioned the last item on here, which students who are dually enrolled are required to pay full tuition.
While we're talking about billing, is there a drop date deadline for all colleges, or does each college have its own date, the last day to drop a class?
It is not one set date, but it's usually within a week. And I will go over that a little bit more in terms of the drop date. But there is a date at each institution. It is usually within the first week or 2. Forgive me, I'm not recalling that on top of my head, where if the student drops the course prior to that date, they are not charged any tuition. It is very early on in our semester, and unfortunately, because of the discrepancy between when our school year starts and your school year starts, that shortens the timeline even more for dual credit high school students.
Okay.
But that is a date that folks should be mindful of, and that is, unless there are questions, an excellent segue to our next slide.
Well, somebody said the dual credit students will not be dropped for a course due to non-payment.
Correct. So if a student is taking the course, enrolled in the course, we will keep on charging the tuition. What will probably happen is that until that bill is paid, the student will not be able to enroll in any further courses. So then moving on to our deadlines, it would be very useful if you don't already know what your partner institution's deadlines are. They are all up on the screen in order of how they should proceed. But we did not give dates because they vary locally, not by much. It's always, more often than not, it's always within the same week. But for some, it might be August 15, while another it's August 16 or 17. So that's why I didn't put dates on here, David, because like everything, it is up to each local
Exactly.
college to determine, and each one of them is independently accredited. But the deadlines that you should be mindful of includes application, registration, start of the semester, that add-drop date that we just discussed, when the midterm is, priority enrollment for next semester, when the final exams take place, the end of the semester, and due dates for grades. And I will just mention due dates for grades is especially important this time of year when we are trying to wrap up the dual credit scholarship as Kia closes out their fiscal year at the end of June. And as of now, I know we still have outstanding grades. We really only have about another week to get those to Kia so we can pay scholarships. So, all of this is tied together.
So how do we or the students know these dates?
The dual credit coordinator is an excellent resource for this, and I am confident that most of these dates are advertised on just about every material that they hand out, and they probably have it memorized, so just go ahead and ask them.
And sometimes the drop add date is before some districts even begin.
Yes.
So I guess you just need to communicate that with your students so they just don't assume that they are dropped from the course.
Yes, that's what I mentioned before. We run into a little bit of difficulty when the start date of our semesters don't align, and that does put these students in a little bit more of a difficult situation. So I think the best that anybody can do with that situation is really be mindful of what options are, if any. I will mention if they are utilizing the dual credit scholarship and they drop the course, they don't lose that scholarship if they are a junior, I should say. Because Kia the law allows for students to utilize the scholarship for 2 successfully completed courses. But they don't manage that throughout the school year. It's from 1 year to the next. So if a student was a junior and they dropped the course, so we return the funds for that scholarship, the student could benefit from that the following year. Unfortunately, if they're a senior, there's no way to allow them to have another one.
And we just have a comment. Dual credit instructor should check their Blackboard rosters in August and compare that to their Infinite Campus rosters. That's a good plan.
That is a good reminder, yes. This is why we have the dual credit coordinators with us and out there in the field, because they're the ones that are doing it and know the good stuff and what to be cautious about. So thank you. I think any other information like that anybody wants to pass on is very welcome. So without further ado, I will, this was really the main reason David and I got together. We thought it would be important for folks to know what the process is for the dual credit scholarship. And even though Kia is not able to be here with us today, they are aware that we are making this presentation. And even though the flow chart is ours, the dates are theirs. So remember that the dual credit scholarship is administered by the Kentucky Higher Education Assistance Authority, KIA. And what you will see below each box is the proposed deadline for the 18-19 academic year for each of these events. So I am just going to walk through this slide, and I ask that it stays on the screen because it's a lot of information to follow. So the very first step is that high schools will notify KIA of who their eligible students are for the dual credit scholarship. And as you can see, the proposed deadline for high schools to do that for the fall is September 15, and for the spring is February 1st. Then that is just the first step. Just because the high school tells KIA that the student is eligible doesn't mean that they get the scholarship. The student then has to go in to mykia.com to indicate where they want to use their scholarship, any of the 16 KCTCS institution, any of the 8 public 4-year institutions, or any one of the handful of private 4-year institutions in Kentucky that are participating in the dual credit scholarship. Then they have to indicate what semester they want the scholarship for. Is it for the fall, is the spring, and how many do they want? Do they want just one, or they want to utilize both of them? So that is on the student to go into mykia.com to do by October 1 for the fall, and by March 1st for the spring. So as you can see, you know, this is well into the semester for all of us. So this was one of the reasons we decided to suppress the e-bills, because we don't have this information until halfway through the semester already. So that makes all of this just a very sort of challenging process for all of us to work with. Then this year, well, Kia has done this in the past, and it's what is in legislation. But if you're not in the know or didn't pay attention, the amount of the scholarship was reduced for what Kia has eligible for now. So I know that they have $5 million for this year, but they also have rollover funds from last year. So they're not worried about running out of the scholarship, but they thought it was important that we mention that they are awarding scholarship by priority. So seniors are always going to get a priority over juniors, and then it's by date of preference. So let's say you have, 400 students that go in tomorrow to MyKia to make their selection. Then they're going to award to seniors first, and then to all the juniors, and then they're going to go to the next day and next day. So again, they don't think they're going to run out of any money, and recall that a lot of juniors have already utilized the scholarship, but this is the process that they're making. Then what they do is they send each post-secondary institution a file saying this student is eligible for a scholarship at your institution for this semester. And then we get that file once a week from them, and I assume the other institutions do as well. Then this changed from last year, not from the current academic year, but from last year, is that the post-secondary institution indicates which course the scholarship will be used for. And we tried to the best of our ability to do that in conjunction with the student. But Kia is nice enough, for example, to allow us when there's a lab attached to a course, so you're in that auto tech lecture, but you're also in the auto tech lab, we can pair those courses and use them for one scholarship. So we probably can better know how to do that than the student, which is why Kia has put that on post-secondary. And essentially what that will do is that would allow students to use a scholarship in the scenario I just described for 5 credit hours instead of a 3 credit hour course by pairing it. So that is our priority, is to try to help maximize the scholarship for students. So we, in our student enrollment management system, indicate what course we want the scholarship to be utilized for. Then starting October 1 in the fall and February 15 in the spring, we send that to Kia. So we tell Kia, Johnny Smith is enrolled in Welding 100, 111 in the fall for one scholarship. And then once Kia gets that information from us, then they disperse payment on that student. So that payment goes to KCTCS, and we work with the colleges to apply that scholarship to that student's account. Then you have to go to the end of the semester, where then we have to provide a grade to Kia for every student that we sent enrollment on. And this is where we notify them if the student withdrew, or what grade they got in the course. And the deadlines for that is January 30th for the fall semester and June 15 for the spring semester. That if this was next year, that would be tomorrow, where all grades have to be in. And I can tell you, as a matter of fact, that as of today, we are missing a lot of grades. But then the reason we do that for them is because we have to do reconciliation. And for any student that did not successfully complete a course, so they withdrew, or they got an F, or they got an incomplete, we have to return 50% of those funds to Kia. That is part of the agreement of being a post-secondary institution awarding the scholarship. So then we have to return those funds to Kia in the fall. That does not look like a fall date to me. I'm sorry, that must be a typo. I'll go back and fix that and communicate out to everybody. No, that is true. I'm sorry, looking at the process. So for fall, we have to submit the grades by January 30th. and then we have to return the funds for the fall semester by March 1st. As you can see, we have a much shorter timeline in the spring where grades are due on the 15th of June, and we have to return all the funds by the 30th because their fiscal year ends then, and everything has to be reconciled. So that was a lot of information on the dual credit scholarship process. I have no doubt there are questions.
Actually, I don't see any at the moment.
I am so thrilled. We either overwhelmed people with information or we gave them exactly what they wanted.
Well, thank you, Harmony. I know that's a tough job, and we've been working on this for quite some time to hopefully make this a little more, a smoother process for everyone on both sides of the fence. So ATCs, if you'll pay special attention now, Tanya's going to give you some options on what we can do, and I understand there are more than one option to identifying the dual credit students in Infinite Campus. Tanya?
Forgive me, David, but I actually had one more slide. I don't know if you realized or not, so I'm going to just jump in with a couple of things to keep in mind on the dual credit scholarship, and then I will be happy to hand it over to Tanya.
Okay.
But just want to keep in mind so that we can make 18-19 a successful year for students is that year-long courses. So for those of you who enroll students in year-long courses, if the student wants the scholarship for that, that scholarship needs to come through on the fall scholarship. So that would be very helpful if you all could just help us communicate that across the board. But they may think they want the spring scholarship because it's an all-year course, but Kia wants us to apply it for the fall. And if everybody knows that up front, it just gets rid of a lot of manual fixing after the fact. Similarly, second trimester courses are also going to be awarded in the fall. So if for the very few of you who have trimester options, if you have students in the second trimester, tell your students that they want to apply for the fall scholarship for that. The other thing Kia wanted me to reiterate when I was speaking to everybody today is that courses that are eligible for SEEK funds should be identified before applying the dual credit scholarship. And I think, Tanya, you were planning on talking about that too, so I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, and if you have any questions while I'm going over this information, just go ahead and type them in on Soapbox or gosoapbox.com, and then I will get to those afterwards. So the first setup information we'll discuss is the setup as far as the ATC's perspective. The ATCs do not send their data to Kia. And it is extremely important to share all of your dual credit information with feeder high schools to ensure courses are set up correctly. Enter the course as normal, and this does not require the special dual credit name formatting. And if all students are dual credit in the course, treat the course as normal. And if the course, meaning that you can mark the difficulty level as DC if you want to for your own records, but you don't have to. Whichever way you mark it, it does not sync over to the high school, so just keep that in mind. If there is a dual credit and non-dual credit students in the same course, then you would create two different sections, schedule at the same time with the same teacher, and make sure you give the sections different numbers, such as section 01 for the non-dual credit class and section 11 for the dual credit. And what you could do is, in order to prevent your teachers from having to go to two separate grade books, what you could do is just allow the teacher to grade those students in the in one location, and then in the section for that's designated for dual credit, then they can manually put the dual credit term grades or final grades in there each time grades are needed. Going on to the feeder high school setup. And this is where this data is what is actually sent to Kia. And there is a requirement as far as the course naming format. There is a a dual credit course data standard located on the Kentucky Department of Education website that contains this information. But basically, the formatting needs to be 4A. I mean, this is just an example. So, for example, if it is a intro to college writing that's offered by Western Kentucky University, the course name would be ENG for English, and then space 101. And then if you wanted to enter in an indicator for the, I clicked off the wrong screen, sorry. For the college, you can at the end of that afterwards, for example, WKU. Difficulty level, this is where the difficulty level must be set as DC for dual credit. This ensures that the course is recorded dual credit for KEYS requirements. And if you had a non-dual credit and a dual credit course in a course, those mixture of students, then you would set up 2 sections and make 2 courses at the high school, and they will mark the section you set up for dual credit only. But be careful about that as far as the syncing of the KTS data exchange goes, because you have to make sure that you do pull in the course numbers that are associated with the technical school, the ones that the technical school creates. Choose post-secondary partner from the drop-down, and then you will also do, you do not need a separate course for labs for the upcoming school year. And ATC dual credit course enrollments will be included in the feeder high school upload to KIA. So if you need more clarification about dual credit setup, you can feel free to email myself. That email address is tanya.fluke@education.ky.gov. Or you can email Kylie Whitaker, and that's KILEY.Whitaker@education.ky.gov. And now I'll go and take a look to see if there's any questions. What if the student withdraws from the college course before the end of the semester? How do we fix that in IC? So if the student withdraws from the college course before the end of the semester, then the student would actually just be end dated on the roster at the high school side, and that will in turn sync over to the technical school side. So you would just end date that enrollment or that roster record for that particular class. They're still in the high school course, but not in the college course. So that's where if you have a dual credit, if you have sections pulled in specifically for one is a regular course that has non-dual credit and dual credit kids in it, and then you have another separate section course that is specifically just for your dual credit kids, that's where that's going to come into play. So obviously you would keep them in the non-dual credit section, but you would in their roster record in the college one, or the one that's for dual credit. It can get a bit confusing. And the thing about it is that every school, every high school, every technical school, every college, they have a slightly different setup of how they've done things this past school year. So it makes it kind of hard not to be vague. But if you have any specific setup questions, I'll be happy to sit down with you and talk about them. Any other questions? I don't see any.
I just want to take this opportunity to thank Harmony and Tanya for joining us today. And I hope that we've given you some information that will make things run smoothly for you this fall when you're enrolling students in dual credit. I remind you that we will take the questions that are on the app, gosoapbox.com, and we will answer those and send those back out to the schools. Make sure you continue to work with your post-secondary partners, your high school partners. Collaboration and working together is what makes all of this successful for our students. And if you happen to be one of those that your grades have not been turned in yet, I would make sure that you check with all your teachers today in the school and make sure those dual credit grades are being sent out before tomorrow. But again, thank you for joining us today, and I appreciate you taking the time. And we'll be sending out a recording in a couple of days for you to go back and view. Thank you very much, and have a great weekend.
Thank you.